hello to the Athlete Climate Academy crowd. My name's Damian Hall. I'm a midlife crisis ultra runner, and yeah, I've been running for about 10 years. And more recently, I suppose I've become really concerned about our climate and ecological emergency. But before I sort of really knew how urgent that stuff was, I was doing most of the big races, in Europe, UTMB and Eiger Ultra Trail and Madeira and Lavaredo and things like that. And I had this moment, probably late 2019, I think. I'd seen some Extinction Rebellion protests in London. I'd seen that covered in the media. And started looking into that a bit more, and also my sister was involved in some of those protests, and it made me realise how urgent this stuff is. Scientists say we need to cut global emissions by 45% this decade, and it's just not happening. So I felt really sort of galvanised by seeing them, but at the same time I had this sort of almost hypocrite complex, because I was an athlete and I was flying to races, and I guess I hadn't really understood how bad those flights were. And I'm not being too judgmental of anyone else. I think in that year, I think I did 7 return flights, including a family holiday, which was more than normal. But then I just sort of realised, I just didn't feel comfortable doing that. I couldn't do that anymore. That was too much. Now, my sister was quite good. I sort of thought I couldn't get involved in protests or even speak out because I had this kind of big footprint. And my sister said, well, Extinction Rebellion aren't about, what you're doing personally. It's more about politics. It's trying to get system change, not individual change necessarily. It just so happens, I think, if you look into this stuff and you care, you're probably going to make some personal changes too. But I also felt very inspired by Greta Thunberg, and I think she's incredible, and Dan and Lawson and Charlotte at Rerun Clothing, Claire Gallagher as well in America, some bloke called Killian Jornet as well. I don't know if you've heard of him. I guess ultimately I was thinking of my kids, and what if in 20, 30, 40 years they say, hey Dad, this really effed up planet we have, what did you do? What did you do to try and prevent that? And that kind of haunts me a bit. And that's what spurs me into a little bit of action. So I guess the first thing I did was I did start joining in some protests with Extinction Rebellion. But I also started looking at my own footprint as well. And there's a company called Our Carbon who sort of audited me and my family, and it was just out of interest more than anything, to try and understand, I suppose, the impact of my flights, but also other changes. So I've become full annoying vegan, which is actually much easier and much more fun than I thought it would be. So I've made, I just thought I can't travel like that anymore. I can't do multiple flights. I haven't actually flown since, but a lot of people haven't flown a lot in the last couple of years. And I'm not saying I'd never fly again, but it would be for something really, a real special once in a lifetime race. And for UTMB this year, I realised I could get the train, and that was nearly a quarter of the footprint of a flight. But I mean, the whole thing with a personal carbon footprint, I think, is that the people that came up with that idea was BP. And they like the idea of individuals focusing on themselves and not maybe thinking too much about what some of these other big companies are doing to our planet. And scientists say, the number one thing that's got to happen is fossil fuels have got to stay on the ground, or at least be dramatically reduced. That's the number one thing. After that, it's probably animal agriculture. So I think in terms of, it's an ongoing debate, how much to do yourself and how much do you push for system change. And for me, I think if someone's got half an hour free a week to do something towards this huge problem we have, for me, trying to be political, trying to do some activism, trying to move towards system change, to me, that's more worthwhile. Yes, I still wash up my hummus pots and make sure they're ready for recycling, but really that's not going to, I don't want to say that doesn't matter, because it does, because it keeps you engaged. And also for me, it's almost a mental health thing that, I've got this climate anxiety. I need to be doing things towards it. Otherwise I'm almost going to sort of lose my mind a little bit. So doing little things, it helps me mentally, but also it can keep a conversation going, with other people. So it's worthwhile doing the little things, I think. But to me, it's kind of activism that is more important. There's also another nice idea which has come out recently is, alongside a carbon footprint, there's a kind of your climate shadow, and that's more about maybe your workplace and where you invest your money and how much time you spend sort of talking about the issue. And that's quite a nice idea that you can actually maybe have more influence there. But in terms of, I should say with that our carbon who I chatted to, they made, we made ourselves carbon negative last year and this year. That does involve a little bit of offsetting, because some element of what I do, some travel feels unavoidable for now, and offsetting's not perfect, but I'm just being honest about that. But we've greatly reduced our footprint. But in terms of activism or what political things people can do, the first thing is to join protests, and that can feel a bit daunting for some, but I found it to be really, really empowering, actually, and really, there can be a really infectious atmosphere, and just to meet other people who have the same concerns as you and want to do things is quite, what's the word? Nice, I suppose. So there's protests. You do, hot comedy haircuts are optional with protesting. You don't have to have a comedy haircut, but it definitely helps. You can, I'm still looking into some of this of what's the most effective things to do. But I've began to bother my local MP quite a lot. I think she's getting quite fed up with me. I write, you try and keep it polite and civil, but I write her emails on various topics. Well, the same topic but different angles. There's something called clicktivism, which is sort of online activism, which people look down at a bit, but to me is worthwhile. That's keeping conversation going. Some things can gain momentum and spread awareness. So if you follow me on Twitter, I apologise because I mostly just retweet Guardian stories about climate change, and I don't know how much effect that really has, but in a way it just helps me to feel I'm doing a little something. There are some other angles as well, though. I think you could, as consumers, we can be political. We can make decisions with our money. And actually, the best decision there is to choose not to spend so much, and not buy so many things. But we can lobby if we think a company could do better. We can politely ask them, in an email, via Twitter maybe. What I've done as well, I suppose, is sort of try to quite openly attach values to my running, whether that's races or more so when I've done sort of record attempts or FKTs. For example, I guess picking up litter, trying to do it without any plastic waste, and doing it on a vegan diet. Now I must again hold my hands up. Sometimes that's created more car journeys than would have happened. I think it's important to be transparent about that. But what I found was, especially the litter picking, which is in some ways the least people can do, like the smallest impact people can do maybe, is gets attention afterwards and in the media. So I've been on various BBC television and radio and stuff, and they always want to ask about it, and it gets their attention, and then I can talk about our climate and ecological emergency. So to me, the message is more important than the action, but you do the action to spread the message. I try and get out my Extinction Rebellion flag that my children made me at the end of some of these runs. I don't know if anyone can quite understand what the flag is, but it helps me as well. It motivates me when I'm doing these things. A preeminent American scientist, Catherine Hayhoe, she's got a new book out that I'm just reading, and she thinks the number one thing people can do is talk about it, doing what we're doing what you guys do so well. And that helps, spread the conversation, spreads ideas. But just lastly, I think it's okay. It's okay to be an imperfect activist. Like, we'll never get everything right. I still will emit some emissions. I'm trying to cut them down. I might make some mistakes in some of my judgments, but it comes from the right place. And being an imperfect activist, I think, is the only way forward, because we're all going to be, to an extent, a bit of a hypocrite, because we're all creating some emissions. We can usually cut some down, but in the words of Jonathan Pye, and maybe, I don't know if you have to bleep this out or not, but he said, you can either be a hypocrite or an a-hole, because we're almost all hypocrites. So I think, it's okay to be imperfect, and that's because it's all too urgent. It's all too late in the day not to be.